The UI that you see on a movie like Iron Man or Avengers or whatever, that's designed to work for maybe 2 seconds on screen and to tie into the backstory. But when we're trying to translate that across, trying to hit that feeling, it is quite difficult because for the HUD, for example, there's something like 40 or 50 different pieces of information you've got to show. Functionality is our main thing, so we have to try and look at those movie ones and try to extract those elements but still apply them to the game UI. So where shall I start? Tell you what, I'll begin at the beginning. So we decided that the UI in the game is okay, but we really want to kind of up the quality bar on it.
Aegis Combat Assist activated.
We have a fairly comprehensive list of what we needed to be displayed on the HUD. What's there in game at the moment doesn't cover all of that.
There were 2 major pushes towards getting the Aegis style right. The first of those, we kind of focused on the look mainly. So there's a lot of design considerations. For example, we want to make sure that everything's got a decent amount of space. Legibility is a big thing. If you've got text in there, it needs to be big enough to see. We also try and make similar things look similar. So if you have a button, it needs to look like a button. Also, we want to avoid things like overlaps. You don't want things to be on top of each other. And in general, with the new HUD as well, what we're trying to do is keep the flight information on the left and save the right-hand side for kind of mode-specific stuff.
So during the design process for this phase, we took the opportunity to add in some much requested fan favourite features, such as having a compass, which will aid in navigation both in atmosphere and space, and between those 2 modes it's either relative to the planet or relative to the galactic plane, and a radar altimeter. So in game at the moment you do sort of have an altimeter, but it's only relative to the perfect Z0 height of the planet, so mountains aren't accounted for, whereas this will account for that.
With the design doc in hand, we went ahead and made our second push on the concepts. Once we have the general look of it sketched out, then it's on to making the visual target. So we'll get the artist to come up with the final artistic look of it. And once everybody's happy with that, then we kind of punt it back to the designers and say, okay, is this working for you? And quite often, to start with, the answer is, no, it's not. So what they're interested in is that, hey, maybe it looks nice, but they really want to get across all the gameplay information. So we might tweak around the positions of a few elements, but it's things like make sure the fonts are big enough, make sure that the bars are strong enough. Then we pass that back to the artist, and there's kind of this cycle goes on for a little while. Well, the designers kind of give their feedback, and the artist kind of tries to address it, and eventually we get somewhere where everybody's happy. I think what we've ended up with after all this kind of concept and design work is something that's quite unique for a game, because it's been very well designed, and it's also had a lot of time visually to try and get it looking good.
So if we look at the final concept, we'll go over some of the features that are there now. If we start at the top, this is where all your warning messages are primarily, so these will cascade in, and much like the current version, they will be coloured to indicate severity. Directly underneath that is a new element dealing with your emissions or signatures, and sort of infrared cross-section and EM signature relative to the background, which is going to be very cool for stealth gameplay. And then we have sort of the main piece of the HUD, which is much wider than we currently have, and that has everything to do with your velocity, thrust capacity, your thrust amount, your fuel amount, your vertical bearings, and then your altitude above the ground. Underneath there we have 2 little spherical widgets, which is sort of your 3D velocity indicator, because quite often in space where you're pointing is not where you are actually heading, so these will give you some visual indication of that in 3D. And then right at the very bottom we have your sort of status warning, so whether you're in coupled or decoupled, whether ESP is on, whether you're in VTOL mode, your landing gear, your countermeasure status, and then finally bottom right is what sort of weapon firing mode you're in, whether it's auto gimbals here, manual gimbals, or fixed.
So in the background, while the visual development's been continuing, we've been working on the building block stuff, which I'm sure you've heard a lot about. One of the key things we've done recently is this system where we can layer the UI, so we can have like layers of flat UI, which lets us achieve this sort of 3-dimensional holographic look. And then we'll be handing all that stuff over to the vehicle feature team so they can actually start to implement it. So the next steps, at the moment we're just finalising what the MFDs are going to look like, and As you probably know, there's loads of other manufacturers in the game, so potentially we'll work on something like RSI or Anvil or Drake next, so go through the same process. But because we've done the first one already, that process should be a lot quicker now, and as we get through more, we'll get into a good flow.